Hey friends, it's Tomer, and in this video, we're going to be covering the final Fallout Commander pre-constructed deck, Science. This is a Jeskai Artifact Energy deck. That's right, this is the first ever Energy Commander pre-constructed deck, and I'm super hyped for it. We're also going to be covering the remaining cards from Mutant Menace. These were cards that were supposed to be previewed 2 nights ago, but were not previewed in time for the previous video, so I put them over here. And as always, if you want to purchase these sweet new precons, you can do so over at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. Alright, we're going to begin with the remaining Mutant Menace cards. So this is a Sultai deck that's focused on mutants, radiation counters, and +1/+1 counters, and proliferating those counters. The first card is Strong, the Brutus Thespian. This is a 6-mana green legendary creature mutant berserker. It's a 7/7 with Ward 2, and it has Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, you get 3 rad counters and put 3 +1/+1 counters on Strong. And you gain life rather than lose life from radiation. This is an excellent top end for the precon deck. It generates rad counters, which is what the deck's all about. It's all about making rad counters, proliferating rad counters, self-milling, and all that good stuff. And it also puts +1/+1 counters on Strong, which you can then proliferate and get even more counters on it that way. And then the most important part, though, is that you gain life rather than lose life from radiation, which is huge because radiation is a huge boon for this deck. You want everybody to be milling, including yourself. However, the life loss is not useful at all to this deck, and hopefully not your opponents either. So having ways to offset the life loss is very important in the precon. Just a couple cards, not like anything crazy, to make sure that you don't embarrassingly die to your own radiation or something like that. And this is a great way of doing so. Instead of losing life, you gain life. So this is actually a great source of life gain in the deck. And it's attached to a 7/7 Ward 2 beater. A little bit awkward that doesn't have even trample or anything, so you need some ways of actually getting through, but even if you are chump blocked or anything, that can actually be a benefit because then you get red counters and you grow strong as well. Next, we've got Marcus, Mutant Mayor. This is a 5-mana Simic legendary creature, Mutant Advisor. It's a 4/4 with Vigilance and Trample. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card if that creature has a +1/+1 counter on it. If it doesn't, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So yeah, it's a nice card draw option in the deck. It's a mutant, so it has synergies there. It adds +1/+1 counters on stuff, so it has synergies there as well too. It's not like super powerful, and like many of these cards, they're very good in the precon and not really playable outside of it. Next, we've got Jason Bright, Glowing Prophet. This is a 3-mana blue legendary creature, Zombie Mutant Advisor. It's a 2/3, and it says whenever a zombie or mutant you control dies, if its power was different from its base power, draw a card. And it has Come Fly With Me. Pay 2 mana, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains flying until end of turn. So this is a really interesting card draw in both the deck, but also in other decks as well. So in this precon, this works really well as basically resiliency to opposing removal. If, you know, your opponents are board wiping or taking out your creatures, as long as your creatures were having a +1/+1 counter on them, most likely, you'll be drawing a card, so you get to rebuild a little bit easier. And it's a zombie mutant, so it double dips with synergies in the precon as well too. And occasionally, if you need to force some card draw, or if you need to just get in there with a big evasive beater, like the 7/7 with no evasion that we saw earlier, you can activate its ability, sacrifice something, give something flying, and a +1/+1 counter. So that's all great in the precon. However, I think this card is even stronger outside of the precon in zombie decks. Zombies are all about pumping up your army with like +1/+1 anthems like Diagraph Captain, and it's all about sacrificing your zombies for value. So putting Jason Bright in, for example, a Will Health deck means that all those decayed zombies that you're going to be sacrificing a million different ways, they're going to be pumped up by your Diagraph Captains and other zombie lords, and you're just going to be drawing a silly amount of cards, all for 3 mana on another zombie, which is just the best. Next, we've got Tato Farmer. This is a 3-mana green creature zombie mutant peasant. It's a 1/4 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may get 2 rad counters. And you can tap it, put target land card in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control tap. Now, this card is one of the best in the entire precon. It's a steady source of rad counters, which the deck really wants to be having. And it is a very consistent consistent source of generating an additional land every single turn, just ramping you, because everybody's going to be getting rad counters, including yourself, and you can grab a land from anybody's graveyard, not just your own. And then as you're ramping out land cards with Tato Farmer, you can also get additional rad counters. So it's a really fun gameplay loop that kind of feeds both abilities. So yeah, excellent source of rad counters, excellent source of self-mill, and very reliable way of just getting a bunch of extra lands ramped out, all on a 3-drop, which is just fantastic. Tato Farmer is not only good in the Precon, but I think it's also going to make the cut in a bunch of different landfall decks. So any decks that care about self-milling and then getting lands from your graveyard, which is like most landfall decks, let's be honest. Most notable example would be Lord Windgrace. They're going to love Tato Farmer because it's already doing everything the deck wants to be doing. It's self-milling, it's putting lands into your graveyard, and then ramping out lands from your graveyard directly onto the battlefield, and it just does that loop over and over again. That's absolutely fantastic. Next, we've got Glowing One. This is a 3-mana green creature zombie mutant. It's a 2/2 of Death Touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they get 4 rad counters. And whenever a player mills a non-land card, you gain 1 life. Now, I already talked about how the Radiation deck needs some ways of offsetting the life loss from Radiation to make sure you just don't embarrassingly die to your own rad counters, and these cards are crucial for it. So this is just a great way to either chump block and be a deterrent to potential attackers, but also a way to put rad counters on your opponent's creatures. But most importantly, it's that last line of text where as people are milling from rad counters, you and your opponents, you're going to be passively gaining a bunch of life as well. So I think this card is a crucial playmaker in the deck. It's not very flashy, but I feel like it's going to be essential to make sure that you don't just randomly die to your own mechanic. Next, we've got Cathedral Acolyte. This is a 2-mana green creature human cleric. It's a 1/2, and it has each creature you control with a counter on it has Ward 1. And then you can tap it, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that enters the battlefield this turn. Ward 1 honestly doesn't feel that strong to me. I start feeling like Ward 2 and then beyond starts feeling exponentially harder to deal with. But Ward 1, I don't know. Usually, like, if I pay 2 mana for my Source of Plowshares, I'm not, like, really that sad about it. But, I mean, this is a 2-drop, and it could potentially give all your creatures Ward 1, so that's pretty nice. And the fact that it also starts putting counters on creatures you're playing afterwards is also nice as well, too. That's a lot of value for a 2-drop. I'm not saying, like, this ability is, like, underpowered or something like that. I'm just saying that, like, yeah, it's not, like, busted or anything. It's fairly costly for 2 mana. And I think it's really nice in the Precon, obviously, because this deck is all about +1/+1 counters. I also think it might have some playability outside of the Precon. Like if you're in a humans deck with Tauren's Fist of the Angels, decks that basically are creature focused and put a lot of +1/+1 counters on their creatures very easily, very passively, I think Cathedral Acolyte might be just like a little extra way of adding an additional amount of protection to your board. Obviously, it's not going to stop anybody from really taking out your creatures, but it might be delaying them from doing so, or acting as an extra layer of deterrent from doing so. And then if you back that up with other forms of protection, it gets a lot harder to interact with your board. So layering these type of protection abilities is actually really, really powerful in Commander. Moving on, we have Nightkin Ambusher. This is a 4-mana Dimir creature mutant warrior. It's a 4/4 with Ward 2, and when it enters the battlefield, target player gets 4 rad counters, and it can't be blocked as long as the defending player has a rad counter. So it adds some rad counters as an ETB. That's nice. It's kind of hard to get rid of because of Ward 2. That's nice too. Its main purpose is just like a 4/4 evasive puncher in the facer, which, I mean, that's absolutely fine. It's not super exciting, but it will get the job done. And that plus, you know, the rad counters ticking away at your opponents can actually put a serious clock on them. So that, I think that's what this card is really trying to be doing in the deck, is just putting an additional clock on your opponents. Next, we've got Contaminated Drink. This is X blue black instant. Draw X cards, then you get half X rad counters rounded up. So this is actually a great rate at drawing cards at instant speed for its mana cost. If you're comparing it to like one of the best options at doing the same thing, Pull from Tomorrow, you have to discard a card after you draw. But the downside here is you get rad counters. But I mean, it really depends if rad counters are a downside or not in your deck. In this deck, it's actually an upside. So this is all upside for you. In some decks that don't want to be self-milled, like combo decks, for example, that maybe, but in decks that don't really utilize the graveyard that much, losing half of X of your life eventually kind of sucks. But yeah, overall, I think this card is actually really aggressively costed and is usually double upside for a lot of decks, meaning it's actually an incredible card. Personally, I'm going to be putting it in my Drownu deck. Drownu gives instant sorceries in the graveyard flashback. So putting stuff in my graveyard directly from my library is actually great. Milling myself is just awesome. It gives me more options to flashback. I wish it was mono black, because then I could have run it in my Toshiro deck, which would have been the ultimate goal. Daniel Holt, I'm very disappointed in you. But you know what? You can't win them all. Next up, we've got Screeching Scorch Beast. This is a 6-mana black creature bat mutant. It's a 5/5 with flying, menace, and whenever it attacks, each player gets 2 rad counters. Whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, you may create that many 2/2 black zombie mutant creature tokens. Do this only once each turn. Now this is an incredible finisher and top end for the Precon. It generates rad counters, which is great, but it's more about that triggered ability where it can flood the table with zombie mutant tokens. Yes, it only triggers once each turn, but your radiation counters are only triggering once each turn anyway. So on your turn, you're going to be milling and making zombie tokens, and then on each opponent's turns, when they resolve their rad counters on their pre-combat main phase, they're also going to be generating mutant tokens for you as well too. So this can generate a ton of mutant tokens every single turn cycle, and that's very exciting. On top of that, it's a flying menace 5/5 that will be generating more and more rad counters every single time it's attacking. So this card is great, and I think it might be viable in other mill decks as well too. I couldn't think of too many great homes for Screeching Scorch Beast off the top of my head. I think Sir Conrad is a nice go-to, but if you have any better options for Screeching Scorch Beast, I think this card is incredible. It just needs very specific homes for it. So if you have any commanders in mind for the Scorch Beast, please let me know in the comment section. Then we've got Mirelurk Queen. This is a 5-mana blue creature crab mutant. It's a 4/4 with vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters. Whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, draw a card, then put a +1/+1 counter on Mirelurk Queen. This ability triggers only once each turn. Just like the Screeching Scorch Beast that we looked at earlier, this is a fantastic top end for the Precon. It's a great draw engine in the deck while being incredibly flavorful. It's also a crab mutant, which I absolutely love. Instead of being an attack trigger, making rad counters on everybody, this one is just ETB, target player gets 2 of them. But you can very realistically see this drawing 4 cards per turn cycle, 1 for each person's turn as they're resolving their rad counters, which is really, really good. And it's growing it, and it's a vigilance creature, so it can immediately start attacking, and you don't have to worry about not having blockers on the backswing. So yeah, I love this card. It's really, really good. Next, we've got Infesting Radroach. This is a 3-mana black creature insect mutant. It's a 2/2 with flying, and it can't block. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many rad counters. And whenever an opponent mills a non-land card, if the Radroach is in your graveyard, you may return it to your hand. So this is just a rad counter generator. It's not super efficient in and itself, but if you can start pumping it up, it can start generating a lot of rad counters and obviously doing a lot of damage in the process. It has evasion, which is nice. And also the really nice thing is that it works very well with rad counters in terms of the self-milling. So if you mill your Infesting Radroach, put it into the graveyard, then it will just like come back to your hand very efficiently. And then of course, if it starts dying on the battlefield, you can always get it back to your hand and replay it and all that stuff. So the fact that it's so hard to remove, and the fact that it works really well with self-milling, like you don't even need to draw the card, it will just come back from your graveyard when you mill it, makes it a really great playmaker in the Precon. All right, so those were all the cards from Mutant Menace, and now we're going to be checking out the next and final Precon, Science. And we're going to be starting with the face commander, Dr. Madison Lee. This is a 3-mana Jeskai, legendary creature human scientist. It's a 2/3, and whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get an energy counter, and then she has three ways of spending energy counters. You can tap her, pay 1 energy, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. You can tap her, pay 3 energy, draw a card, tap her, pay 5 energy, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So Madison tells you exactly what this precon's all about. It's about artifacts and it's about energy. And she does a great job of merging the two. She's a fantastic source of energy generation. Whenever you're playing an artifact, you get an energy counter. She's a 3-drop, so she comes onto the battlefield pretty early, which is essential for these type of triggered abilities to work. You want to play Madison first, and then you want to start flooding the board with artifacts. And then she also doubles as a very flexible payoff for all the energy you're generating. All 3 of these abilities are incredibly useful. Drawing cards, nobody can say no to that. Trample, haste, and extra damage. And then recursion directly onto the battlefield is just absolutely fantastic. So this is like so much value on a 3-drop. It's super pushed, but it kind of has to be because energy kind of needs the help. It's a pretty small card pool to work with. So to make it work, you need to have a very powerful commander leading it. And Madison definitely checks that box. Moving on, we have Liberty Prime Recharge. This is a 5-mana Jeskai legendary artifact creature robot. It's an 8/8 with a Vigilance, Trample, Haste, and whenever it attacks or blocks, sacrifice it unless you pay 2 energy. And you can pay 2 mana, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, you get 2 energy, and draw a card. So Liberty Prime is a fantastic beater in the deck. It's a Vigilance, Trample, Haste, so it starts smashing people for 8 immediately, and they can block even when it's swinging out, which is great. The only downside is you have to pay energy to make it work. And that looks like a downside, but like really you're in an energy deck, you should have enough energy to pay for it every single time you're attacking or blocking. And even if you don't have that 2 energy available, its activated ability allows you to put that sacrifice trigger on the stack, and then activate its ability, pay 2 mana, sacrifice an artifact, and you'll get 2 energy and draw a card. And then you can immediately use that 2 energy you got from its activated ability to pay its triggered ability, pay 2 energy or else you sacrifice it. So if you don't have an energy, you can still attack and block with it. It's just a little bit awkward, and you have to have artifacts you're willing to sacrifice other than Liberty Prime. So when the deck is working as intended, you're just smashing in for 8 every single turn. And then after, your opponents decide not to attack into the giant 8/8 on the end step before your turn, you can always just tap it, sacrifice an artifact, draw a card, and get an energy if there's an artifact you don't really care about sacrificing. Next, we've got Elder Owen Lions. This is a 4-mana Azorius legendary creature human knight. It's a 3/3, and artifacts you control have ward 1. And when it enters the battlefield or dies, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So Owen is a nice support piece for the deck. The deck is an artifact deck, so giving everything ward 1 is nice. Like I said, I don't think ward 1 is like super strong or anything, but it is a nice deterrent. And then it's a double artifact recursion, once when it enters the battlefield and once when it dies. So that's a lot of value for 4 mana. That's a fair mana cost for what it's doing, and it works really nice in the Precon. I don't think it's good enough in artifact decks outside of the Precon because artifact decks are so broken and the card pool is so intense in terms of competition, but it is really nice in the Precon. Next, we've got Assaultron Dominator. It's a 2-mana red artifact creature robot. It's a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. Whenever an artifact creature you control attacks, you may pay 1 energy. If you do, put your choice of a +1/+1, first strike, or trample counter on that creature. So this is a cute little energy payoff. It buffs your creatures, but you do have to pay a lot of energy to do so, and the buff isn't like super big or anything. I like it. It's cute. It's not like the greatest outlet for your energy, but it's a 2-drop and it's nice and aggressive, and it comes with 2 energy, and yeah, it's cute. It's a nice little playmaker. Next, we've got Brotherhood Scribe. This is a 2-mana white creature, human artificer. It's a 1/3 with Metalcraft. You can tap it, you get 1 energy, activate only if you control 3 or more artifacts, and whenever you get 1 or more energy during your turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Now, this is a great energy generator, but more importantly, a huge buff for all your creatures when you want to start swinging for lethal. Attaining Metalcraft is trivial, obviously, in an artifact deck. Tapping it to get 1 energy a turn is okay. It's not like great or anything, but it's a 2-drop, so it's a nice steady source of energy. But more importantly, it's that triggered ability. So it triggers itself, gives all your creatures +1/+1 until end of turn. And then if you're gaining energy from other sources on your turn, this could go to like +2/+2, +3/+3, +4/+4, and then, you know, your opponents are dead. So that's actually a lot of value on a 2-drop. Energy generator, very consistent, but more importantly, it smashes face for a lot. Next, we've got Curie, Emergent Intelligence. This is a 2-mana blue, a legendary artifact creature robot. It's a 1/3, and whenever it deals combat damage to player, draw cards equal to its base power, which is 1. Then it has an activated ability, pay 1 in a blue, exile another non-token artifact creature you control. Curie becomes a copy of the exiled creature, except it has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. So its base power is small. It's just a 1/3, so it's only going to be drawing 1 card every single time you're hitting with somebody. But I mean, that's respectable for a 2-drop, I believe. But when you have like a really juicy big creature that you want to copy with Curie, then, you know, that card draw thing becomes really, really good. Like, imagine copying Liberty Prime and then starting to draw 8 cards every single time you're smashing face with it. That's going to be super fun. Next, we've got Red Death Shipwrecker, and I absolutely love the art on this one. It's a 2-mana Izzet legendary creature, Grab Mutant. It's a 1/3 and has alluring eyes. You can tap it, go target creature an opponent controls. That player draws a card, and you add 1 red mana. So you can utilize this on your opponent's turn. So if they have like a huge hasty beater that comes out of nowhere, you can goad it before it comes to your face, which is really nice. But then you don't get to utilize the red mana really. But if you activate it at sorcery speed, you can utilize the red mana as like pseudo ramp. So it's a 2-drop that kind of acts as a mana rock, but it requires goading your opponent's creatures, which is nice. But then your opponent gets to draw a card, which is not so nice. I don't know. This is a really weird card. I like it. It's like kind of group huggy, kind of goady. It might be good enough in like a Goads Matters deck. Well, yeah, definitely good enough in a Goads Matters deck. And maybe a group hug style deck too. It's a very interesting card. I like the mechanics as well too. I'm not sure where I would put it outside of the deck. It seems like a kind of weird inclusion in the Precon though, because it has nothing to do with energy and nothing to do with artifacts. It's just kind of here. But yeah, I think it's a really cool design. Next, we've got James Wandering Dad. This is a 3-mana blue legendary creature human scientist. It's a 2/4 and it has adventure. So the adventure side is follow him, X and double blue for an instant adventure, investigate X times. And then the creature side is tap it, add 2 colorless mana, spend this mana only to activate abilities. So this card is actually pretty sweet. That seems like a fairly evenly cost to investigate a whole bunch of times at instant speed. So I like the adventure side. And then the creature side, it's fine. It's a 3-drop, but it can tap for 2 mana, but only if you activate abilities. So like cracking your clues, for example, is the most obvious ways of using it. But there could be other ways of utilizing it in the Precon too. I'm not quite sure. And then outside of that, obviously there's a lot of ways of utilizing it outside of the Precon too. I think this card might be good enough to show up in clue decks outside of the Precon. It's not like crazy good or anything, does anything busted, but like the 2 things it does is good, and I think it does it at a fair rate. Next, we've got Nick Valentine, Private Eye. This is a 3-mana blue legendary artifact creature, Synth Detective. It's a 2/2, and it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures. And then whenever it or another artifact creature you control dies, you may investigate. So Nick is an interesting card. I'm not quite sure how many homes would actually really like Nick Valentine, and I'm not quite sure how good it is in this deck even, because it doesn't really do anything with energy or whatever. It is an artifact creature though. However, I would be remiss to point out that this plus like any artifact creature plus like Krark-Clan Ironworks plus like Nim Deathmantle is an easy combo, but like, yeah, Krark-Clan Ironworks and Nim Deathmantle comboing off is not very much a revelation or anything. But yeah, it's interesting. Next, we've got Paladin Dance. Steel Maverick. This is a 3-mana white legendary artifact creature Synth Knight. It's a 3/3 Vigilance lifelink, and you can exile it. Each creature you control that's an artifact or human gains indestructible until end of turn. So this is an excellent source of protection in the Precon. It basically prevents your opponents from firing off a board wipe to deal with your board until they find a way to take out Dance himself, and then they can board wipe, providing you much needed time to either kill your opponents, like do your thing and kill your opponents and win the game, or find other sources of protection in case they try to kill Dance, or, you know, in the case they try to wipe the board and you have something else afterwards to protect it anyway. So I love the board wipe deterrent over here. And even outside of this Precon, I think if you're an artifact creature deck in white, this is just going to be fantastic because it is also an artifact creature, so it doubles up on various synergies. And then maybe even in human decks, like if your deck is all humans, then Paladin Dance is going to be very effective at controlling, like keeping your board around. It's just like basically another Boromir in your deck. So that's actually really good. I don't know. It has a lot of potential, I believe. I think it's very well costed and it's a very powerful ability. Next, we've got Rex Cyberhound. This is a 3-mana Azorius legendary artifact creature robot dog. It's a 2/2, and whenever Rex deals combat damage to a player, they mill 2 cards and you get 2 energy counters. You can pay 2 energy counters, choose target creature card in a graveyard, exile with a brain counter on it, activate only as a sorcery, and Rex has all activated abilities of all cards in exile with brain counters on them. So I don't know how to evaluate Rex. I think I'm a little bit too smooth brain for Rex's cyber brain. Like it has a combat trigger, which is kind of cool, but it's a 2/2 with no evasion, so you need to work to make sure you get that 2 energy and start milling people. It acts as graveyard hate, but sorcery speed, and not very well done at that. But its main payoff is you just like take things with activated abilities to give Rex those activated abilities. But I can't think of many situations where, you know, there's so many powerful activated abilities in graveyards that it's like this becomes like super powerful or anything. Yeah, I don't know. There might be situations where Rex is just super good. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section what you'd be doing with Rex. My smooth brain can't handle it. Next, we've got Synth Eradicator. This is a 3-mana red artifact creature Synth Soldier. It's a 3/3 with haste, and whenever it attacks, exile a top card of your library. You may get 2 energy counters. If you don't, you may play that card this turn. So, you know, whenever it's attacking, you either get 2 energy or you get a card. That's like super sweet. And then you can tap it, pay 3 energy. Synth Eradicator deals 3 damage to any target. Now this is a card I can get behind. My smooth brain can understand this one. 3 mana, enters the battlefield, can start immediately lightning bolting creatures, taking out small utility creatures. That's amazing. And then if it's not doing that, it can generate energy or generate card advantage. Yeah, this card is great. It does everything the deck wants to be doing. It's a payoff for energy, it's an energy generator, it's a card advantage generator, and it's an artifact creature. It's just a 3/3, so, you know, sometimes being able to attack, you're going to need additional help, just like my poor boy Rex. But, you know, it's a little bit bigger at least, and it has haste, so you can surprise, get somebody before they can leave blockers up, maybe. Yeah, I love this card. This card's great. Next, we've got Arcade Ganon. This is a 4-mana Azorius legendary creature, Human Doctor. It's a 2/3, and it has tap it, draw a card, then discard a card, put a quest counter on Arcade Ganon, and then for Old Lang Syne, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an artifact or human spell from your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of quest counters on Arcade Ganon. All right, so this card's not good. It's a 4-mana looter, which is not a spot you want to be in. It generates quest counters, and then eventually, once you have a couple quest counters, you can start reanimating stuff from the graveyard, especially stuff that you've been discarding with Arcade, for example. So it turns into straight up card advantage. That all sounds great in theory. It's just how slow this process is. You're going to play a 4-drop. It doesn't have haste. And so if you either need to find a way to give it haste, or you have to wait a turn and then you activate it, you get 1 quest counter. And if you look at the deck list, there's like no 1-drops to be getting. Like I think there's like a couple artifacts, but like the odds of you actually utilizing Arcade's ability, the first quest counter you get, are very, very low. And then you have to just like wait additional turns, and eventually you start reanimating some things. And also you still have to pay the mana cost of them too. You don't even get them for free. So it's just like super slow, not mana efficient, not exciting. If there were ways to like proliferate quest counters in this deck and everything, then maybe I would be more on board with it. But that's like a Mutant Menace thing and not really found in this deck. So yeah, I'm not a fan of Arcade Ganon in this precon or any. All right, moving on. We have Robobrain Warmind. This is a 4-mana blue artifact creature robot. It has a power equal to the number of cards in its hand, and its toughness is 5. And when it enters the battlefield, you get an amount of energy equal to the number of artifact creatures you control, so at least 1. And then whenever it attacks, you may pay 3 energy. If you do, draw a card. So this could potentially generate a lot of energy for you. At the very least, it's going to be generating 1 energy for you. And then it has the energy payoff of drawing a card. It has 5 toughness. It can have potentially a lot of power. So it should be able to attack pretty profitably. And yeah, it's just a solid player in the deck. Next, we've got Sentinel Sarah Lions. This is a 5-mana Boros legendary creature human knight. It's a 4/4 with haste. As long as an artifact enters the battlefield under your control this turn, creatures you control have +2/+2, and it has Battalion. Whenever Sarah and at least 2 other creatures attack, it deals damage equal to the number of artifacts you control to target player. So this is a sweet finisher in the deck. It basically is always going to be giving your creatures +2/+2, which is a great Anthem effect. Like, I mean, the deck is all about casting artifacts, so having one enter the battlefield is not much of a hoop to jump through. And then when you're attacking with 3 or more creatures, she could just dome people for like, 10 damage in the face. And she has haste, so she can start immediately doing that damage. So yeah, this is a great card to play in the later turns of the game and just clean up your opponents. Next, we've got Sentry Bot. This is a 5-mana white artifact creature robot. It has flash, and it costs 1 less to cast for each creature attacking you. So it can cost up to 5 mana, but it can cost up to 1 mana if you have at least 4 creatures attacking you. It's a 2/5, and when Sentry Bot enters the battlefield, you get energy for each creature attacking you, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 3 energy. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this is a surprise blocker. It's not like an amazing surprise blocker or anything because it's just a 2/5, but it can generate a decent amount of energy when it comes onto the battlefield, and then it starts pumping up your team. I think this one's kind of like meh. It's not as exciting as Sarah, definitely. We went from like such a super crazy good finisher to this one, which is kind of bleh. But I mean, it's more defensively used and it can come out earlier and all that stuff. So yeah, it's okay. Next, we've got Sean, Father of Synths. This is a 5-mana Izzet legendary creature human scientist. It's a 3/4, and whenever you attack, you may create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of target attacking legendary creature you control other than Sean, except it's not legendary and it's a synth artifact creature in addition to its other types. And when it leaves the battlefield, exile all synth tokens you control. Now, this is a pretty interesting card. It can copy legendary creatures. And those creatures don't disappear after combat or end step or anything. They only disappear when Sean disappears. So that could be potentially quite strong. They also turn into synth artifact creatures, so additional synergies in the deck. Yeah, it's cool. It's neat. I like it. Next, we've got Synth Infiltrator. This is a 5-mana blue artifact creature synth. It has Improvise, and you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a synth artifact creature in addition to its other types. So if in Improvise, you can tap like 3 random artifacts, and you can just play this for double blue, which is nice. And then it copies the best thing on the battlefield, but then it has additional synergies as an artifact creature. It's kind of comparable to Phyrexian Metamorph. I think overall it's a lot weaker than Phyrexian Metamorph because it can't copy artifacts, and you do need to tap down 3 or at least 2 things to be comparable in terms of mana cost. But yeah, it is a cool, relatively cheap clone, and it has additional synergies in the deck, which is nice. Next, we've got the Motherlode Excavator. This is a 5-mana red Legendary artifact creature robot, it's a 5/5, and when it enters the battlefield, choose target opponent. You get an amount of energy counters equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls, and whenever it attacks, you may pay 4 energy. When you do, destroy target non-basic land defending player controls, and creatures that player controls without flying can't block this turn. So this is sweet thematic non-basic hate. Everybody's running non-basic lands in Commander. They're a dime a dozen, even in like monocolor decks. So you're going to be generating some amount of energy when this enters the battlefield. Probably a lot if you play this like in the mid game when somebody has like 6 or more non-basics. Like getting 6 energies as an ETB is quite nice. But then more importantly, you can start blowing up those problematic non-basics, those Cabal Coffers, you know, the Fields of the Dead, all those nonsense non-basics can be blown up in a very thematic way. So that's a really cool way of the Precon dealing with problematic non-basics. Next, we've got Behemoth of Vault 0. This is a 6 mana colorless artifact creature robot. It's a 6/6 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, you get 4 energy counters, and when it dies, you may pay any amount of energy equal to target non-land permanent's value. When you do, destroy that permanent. Now this card is kind of bleh. I mean, if you compare it to Cityscape Leveler, yeah, it costs 6 mana and it generates energy, which is nice. But, you know, like the Leveler is just so much better at doing its main duty, which is beating people in the face while also blowing stuff up. Whereas a Behemoth just blows something up only when it dies. And then you also have to pay a bunch of energy for it as well, too. Yeah, it's like, I guess it's fine in the Precon, but a little bit disappointing as a top end, I think. Next, we've got Electro Siphon. This is a new counterspell. Ooh, it's a 3 mana, is it instant, and it says counter target spell. You get an amount of energy counters equal to its mana value. So this is just like very thematic, very on par for the energy deck, which is very cool. 3 mana is a lot for a counterspell, honestly, but it does generate a bunch of energy counters potentially if you counter the right thing. I wouldn't say it's like a good card, but it is a very thematic card. And it's just cute, and if you're playing an energy deck, you might as well go all out even with your counter spells, right? Next, we've got Bottle Cap Blast. This is a 5 mana red instant with Improvise, and it deals 5 damage to any target. If excess damage was dealt to a permanent this way, create that many tap treasure tokens. So this card is okay in the Precon, but I think it gets way better in treasure decks, actually, because the treasures you could be tapping to pay most of the cost. You just pay 1 red mana. If you tap 4 treasures, you can pay 1 red mana, take out something. Usually most creatures will be dying to this, and then if there's any excess damage, you get some treasure tokens as well too, which is really nice. I might be putting it in my Myra deck because it's an instant, so it works with Myra, and I can just tap my attractions to pay for the improvised cost, which is very cute. Then we've got Automated Assembly Line. This is a 2 mana white artifact. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get an energy, and then you can pay 3 energy, create a tapped 3/3 colorless robot artifact creature token. Now for 2 mana, this is an excellent source of energy in the deck. The deck is just all about artifact creatures, and it wants to go smashing, and it generates a lot of energy while you're doing that. And then the payoff is you get to make more artifact creature tokens, which can then attack and generate more energy. That's a lot of value for a 2-drop, and it's a good playmaker in the Precon. Then we've got Expert Level Safe. This is a 2 mana colorless artifact. It says when it enters the battlefield, exile the top 2 cards of your library face down. You can pay 1 mana, tap it. You and target opponent each secretly choose 1, 2, or 3. Then those choices are revealed. If they match, sacrifice it and put all exile cards with it into their owner's hands. Otherwise, exile the top card of your library face down. So every single time you activate this and guess wrong than your opponent, you get to put another card into exile. So when you eventually guess what your opponent has chosen, you get to get even more cards. It's cute. Is it like a good card? No, but it's very cute, and it is also an artifact, so I mean, it works well with the deck. Then there's Plasma Caster. This is a 2 mana red artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you get 2 energy counters. You can pay 2 energy counters, choose target creature that's blocking equipped creature, flip a coin. If you win the flip, exile a chosen creature. Otherwise, Plasma Caster deals 1 damage to it, and it has a equip cost of 2. I think this card's a bit underpowered for what it's doing. Like, yeah, it generates energy, but it does so at I think a less than ideal mana efficient rate. The creature doesn't really get pumped that much, it's just +1/+1. And yeah, it does make it kind of scary, spooky for your opponents to block that creature if you have energy available, because that thing gets zapped even if it's way bigger. But yeah, I just don't like this card. I like the art though, the art's sick. This equipment I do like though. This is T45 Power Armor. It's a 2 colorless artifact equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. A creature gets +3/+3 and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 1 energy. If you do, untap equipped creature, then put your choice of a Menace, Trample, or Lifelink counter on it. And it has equipped a 3. So this power armor actually makes your creatures kind of scary, right? Like it gives them +3/+3, and it has a very medium cost of just 1 energy to untap it and then start making it even scarier with lifelink, trample, menace, all that good stuff. I think it's worth the cost, and it is solid in the precon. Then there's Brotherhood Vertibird. This is a 3 mana colorless artifact vehicle. It has flying, it's a 4 toughness, and its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control, and it has crew 2. So this is just like a very straightforward finisher in the artifact deck. If you have a whole bunch of artifacts on the battlefield, treasures, artifact creatures, whatever, it will be just a huge flying beater. It's straight, it's to the point. I like its simplicity, and yeah, it will do the job in the precon. Next, we've got Camp. This is a 3 mana colorless artifact fortification. Whenever fortified land is tapped for mana, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. If that creature shares a color with the mana that land produced, create a junk token, and you can fortify 3. So for 3 mana, you attach it to target land you control, fortify only as a sorcery. Now, I will say, I like that they brought back fortification. Fortification has shown up on a single card. It made its debut like more than 10 years ago. I want to say like 15 years ago from Time Spiral Block from Future Sight. And it was just like as a one-off that, you know, maybe we'll throw it back in the future. And here it is. Here's the second one. So that's really cool. That's really cool that they brought back a card from Future Sight. That's super awesome. The downside is I don't think this card is very good. I think for all that mana you're spending at least 6 mana to get this effect. No, it's not mana efficient enough for me, sorry. The deck also runs 2 bobbleheads. Bobbleheads are all 3 mana colorless artifact bobbleheads. They all tap to add 1 mana of any color, and they all have a secondary ability where you have to pay some amount of mana, tap it, and then you get a cool ability that scales up with the number of bobbleheads you control. This one has Endurance bobblehead and Intelligence bobblehead. So Endurance one says up to X target creatures you control get +1/+0 and indestructible until a turn, where X is the number of bobbleheads you control as you activate the ability. Activate only as a sorcery. If this was not activated as a sorcery, I think this card would have been super awesome, but as it is, it's not that great in my opinion. The Intelligence bobblehead though, you give a 5 mana and tap it, so 6 mana total essentially. You draw X cards where X is the number of bobbleheads you control. This card also, like if you have, you know, 4 or more bobbleheads, it starts being quite good, but if you have like 2 or 1, it's very bad. So all these bobbleheads, they're all very janky, but the idea is that you want to like collect all 7, and then when you have, you know, 4 or more bobbleheads, they all become quite decent, I guess. It's a very janky concept, but it's still one that I really like. I definitely want to build a bobblehead deck just for like Commander Clash or whatever. It's not good, but it'll be funny. Next, we've got Nuka-Cola Vending Machine. This is a 3 mana colorless artifact. It has pay 1 mana, tap it, create a food token, and then whenever you sacrifice a food, create a tapped treasure token. All right, so this is probably the most busted card in the precon. I mean, not in the precon itself, but outside of the precon. By itself, it's like, it's fine. This deck doesn't really make that many food tokens, I don't think. I saw a single card that made food tokens, so it's just kind of by itself making food tokens, which is fine. You can like gain some life, and then when you're sacrificing the food, you make treasures, which is great. But that's the second part that's so good. Like if you're in a food deck, like Samwise Gamgee, imagine you're sacrificing your foods left and right. You're sacrificing them for mana to your Crocodile Ironworks. You're sacrificing them to Samwise to get back historic cards from your graveyard. You're generating a ton of food tokens with Samwise or whatever other food generators. And then as you're sacrificing them for so much value, you're getting even 10 times more value because now all of those become converted into treasures as well. Hello? That is insane. Insane. Nuka-Cola vending machine is going to be a new staple in basically any food deck. It's like very okay, very fair in the Precon, and then very busted in all the food decks, honestly. Then we've got the Pridewin Steel Flagship. This is a 6-mana white legendary artifact vehicle. It's a 6/6 with flying. And whenever another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white human knight creature token with this creature gets +2/+2 as long as an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn and has crew 2. I think this vehicle kind of slaps in the Precon. Like, it's a good beater for its cost. And then it generates a bunch of tokens, which basically count as 4/4s because they're going to always be playing artifacts every single turn, hopefully. So they're going to be attacking as 4/4s on your turn, which is, yeah, it's very, very respectable. I like this as a nice finisher for the deck. Next is Overencumbered. This is a 2-mana white enchantment aura. Enchant opponent. When Overencumbered enters the battlefield, enchanted opponent creates a clue token, a food token, and a junk token. At the beginning of combat on enchanted opponent's turn, that player may pay 1 for each artifact they control. If they don't, creatures can't attack this combat. So this card is kind of hard to evaluate. If you give this to an opponent that is like a green player that's focused on creatures or whatever, then they don't care, right? Because they won't have any artifacts on the battlefield. They'll gladly take the clue token, the food token, and the junk token, and basically you're giving them 2 cards and some life. They just eat those and then go about their merry business, so it really just does nothing against those type of decks. Against your average non-green deck that has like a bunch of mana rocks or something, then it will actually be a deterrent, you know, like they can eat the tokens, but then they still have a bunch of mana rocks on the battlefield, a bunch of signets or whatever. So it will be a little bit of a hassle for them to pay the cost, or else they can't attack. But, you know, if you throw it out as an artifact deck, then they won't be able to attack much at all. The downside is, though, it's not like it's tapping down their creatures. Like, if this is tapping down their creatures, then I would be like totally on board with this. It would be insane. But not being able to attack, like, if your deck actually cares about attacking, then yeah, that's a big bummer. But like a lot of decks just don't care about, you know, attacking every single turn. And then Overencumbered just doesn't do anything against those people either, even if they are artifact decks. And then they could just remove the enchantment, you know? If they just remove the enchantment and then they're up 2 cards and gain some life, I don't know. I don't think this card's very good. It's very cute and flavorful, but I don't think it's very strong. Here's a card I do like quite a bit. This is Nerd Rage. It's a 3-mana blue enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. So it's just like a straight up divination on ETB. And enchanted creature you have no maximum hand size. And whenever this creature attacks, if you have 10 or more cards in hand, it gets +10/+10 until end of turn. Wowzers. So this is the divination +++. 3 mana, draw 2 it's fine. It's not great. It's a divination. But then it has that extra value of no maximum hand size. And if you have a bunch of cards, you just start smashing. It's great. I'm personally very excited to put it in Min Wily Illusionist. You can cheat Nerd Rage into play by sacrificing an illusion that has 3 or more power. And then it draws 2 cards immediately, which could trigger Min and make another illusion. And then, you know, the Nerd Rage can kick in and you could just, if you put this on like Min, for example, you start killing people with Voltron damage with Min. That's super hilarious. Then we've got 2 new sagas. The first one's Vault 112, Sadistic Simulation. This is a 4-mana Izzet saga with 3 chapters. Chapter 1 and 2, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. You get 2 energy. And then chapter 3 is pay any amount of energy. If you paid 1 or more energy this way, shuffle your library, then exile that many cards from the top. You may play one of those cards without paying its mana cost. I think this is a nice little player in the energy deck. It generates energy, 4 total over 2 turns. It taps down problematic creatures. And then on chapter 3, you can dump some energy and get like a free spell. That's fine. It's not like super good or anything, but it's fine. The next saga is Vault 13 Dweller's Journey. It's a 4-mana white saga with 3 chapters. Chapter 1, for each player, exile up to 1 other target enchantment or creature that player controls until Vault 13 leaves the battlefield. Chapter 2, you gain 2 life and scry 2. And then Chapter 3, return 2 cards exiled with Vault 13 to the battlefield under their owner's control and put the rest on the bottom of their owner's libraries. So this is kind of like a riff on Grasp of Fate. You can exile 1 thing per player, including one of your own things too. And then after 2 more turns, you return 2 of those cards back. So like ideally, if each person has something that you can exile, including your own, you can like exile 1 of your own creatures that has like a ETB trigger that's beneficial, and then exile 2 problematic things, and then 1 thing that you don't really care about. And then after 2 turns, you return your thing, the thing you don't care about, but the other 2 things are gone forever, which is cool. I like it. That's it. It is 4 mana. It's a little bit slow. I've always had these gripes with sagas, but it is cool in the Precon. All right, the final new card in the deck is Helios 1. It's a new land. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana, or you can pay 1 mana and tap it to get 1 energy counter, or you could pay 3 mana, tap it, pay X energy, sacrifice it, destroy target non-land permanent with mana value X. Activate only as a sorcery. So this land is pretty good. It's only taps are colorless, and that is a big drawback, especially in a 3-color deck. But the payoff is you can pay essentially 2 mana to make an energy counter if you really need to. And then if you really need to get rid of a problematic non-land permanent, you can always do so by paying 4 mana, a bunch of energy, and sacrificing the land. So it works in a pinch. You never really want to be activating these abilities if you don't need to. But it's really nice to have those abilities there, and that's probably worth not having a land that taps for colored mana or mana fixing. So those are all the brand new cards. Now we're going to check out the most notable reprints, and there's not a lot. There's Panharmonicon, which I believe the regular, like the cheapest version was $10. The Fallout one is currently at 20. Treasure Vault is, I think the baseline is $5 as well too. And then Lightning Greaves, I believe was like creeping up to like $6 or more for the cheapest version. So those are all pretty decent reprints. And then it goes down to like $2 reprints. So the reprint value on this one is okay. The prices for the Fallout cards are a little bit misleading. Obviously, they're way more expensive because they haven't even come out yet. These are the pre-order prices, but I mean, just in general, the reprint prices aren't super good. There's not that much value in terms of the reprint over here. But the cool thing is that all the reprints, no matter how cheap or expensive they are, they all come with sweet new Fallout in-universe artwork to keep everything in the Precon all Fallout all the time, which is very cool. All right, and that is the full science deck. You can see the full deck list on the screen over here. Keep in mind that all the reprints that you're going to be seeing on the screen are going to have Fallout artwork attached to it. So if you're looking at random artworks on your like Talisman of Progress and the Austere Command, don't worry, they're going to be replaced with Fallout art. These are just like placeholders. Yeah, the deck list looks really sweet. There's a couple cards that I was kind of like, why is this here? But overall, this is a really cool deck. It's the first ever energy deck that they've ever printed for Commander. So that's very notable. And it looks very well designed. I'm excited about a lot of the new cards. And yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on these despite not being a Fallout fan. So I guess if you're a Fallout fan, you're probably loving this right now. So yeah, those are all 4 of the Fallout Precon decks. I will be coming out soon with a Precon upgrade guide. So if you're picking up these Precons and are looking to upgrade it with, you know, like 10 new cards or whatever, I will try to do a nice analysis of every single deck and then showcase how I would upgrade them based on that analysis. So stick around for that. It's going to be coming out next week. Like and subscribe if you never want to miss a video. And until next time, friends, see ya.